Do not adjust your digital device. What you are about to see and hear may shock and appall you. Join our hosts as they encounter countless thrills, spills, chills, and hilarity as they explore the very weirdest in pop culture. The following media is so strange, so beyond the scope of what is normal, it will make you ask the question, why does this exist? Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Why Does This Exist? I am Chris.
And I'm Rob.
And today we are going to talk about a little blue hedgehog that changed the landscape of gaming and also, well, he was number one for a short while. And then there were some bad times, but at the end of the day, he still came out on top.
Yeah.
He's got to go fast, and he's our man, Sonic the Hedgehog. Just a quick rundown of everything that we do. This is a podcast about the very weirdest in pop culture, whether it is about a video game character like we are about to speak about today, a movie, music, or anything of that nature. Whatever it is, we will get to it, we'll cover it within reason. Just as long as the topic isn't too controversial, we will discuss it. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube, which no one really gives a shit about the notification bell. No one cares about our YouTube channel. 0% of people are subscribed to it. So do whatever you want, but have a good time. All you got to do is help juice our numbers so that way we can start getting some real money from the YouTube people. We need 500 subscribers and about 4,000 watch hours. So get to clicking, and then you could just ignore everything that we have to say. But if you hate somebody, send them our way. I don't know how else to get over with these people. If you like the show, thank you. If you know somebody who would hate this, thank you. But if you want to give us money, you can head on over to patreon.com/whydoesthisexist, and you can give us as little as $1 or as much as you want, and it feeds the algorithm. More people will find out about us, and on top of that, you will have total access to our Discord server. We'll let you in, and you can hang out with us. You can bounce some ideas around. You can come up with some topics. You can feed us some. You can feed us some concepts. You might even be able to pitch some ideas, and maybe we'll let you write for us if you want to do that. Like our good friend Tony, who has been writing a storm for us. He recently has an article on Jaws clones that do not have sharks in them. I think you would get a kick checking them out. And yeah. You'll get all access to the Discord server. We might even let you in on an episode so you can come hang out. And if you do donate money to our Patreon and you give us $1, we are going to absolutely roast you live on the air. So whatever your name is, let's just say your name is, I don't know, Henry Heckenschmidt. Let's just say Henry Heckenschmidt gives us $1. Instead of all the other sheeple content creators that you follow where they say, oh, thank you, Henry Heckenschmidt. You're a great guy. We will instead say something to the nature of, Henry Heckenschmidt gave us $1 and his mother hates him. That's exactly what we're going to do to you people. We will absolutely roast you on the air. And it'll make us feel better. We'll just leave it at that. It'll make us feel good. But that's the news. Here's the weather. You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge from a ragtag group of rogues. So let's get on with the goddamn show.
So, Sonic the Hedgehog. So Sonic, of course, I think everybody pretty much knows who Sonic is. I would say the only video game character that is more popular than Sonic is probably Mario. Um, and
Which, fun fact, Sonic was created specifically
yes,
to kill Mario. In
yes,
fact, the in fact the project's code name was Operation Destroy Mario.
yes. So in the year 1990, uh, Nintendo was pretty much on top of the world at this point. They had released the Super Nintendo. They had recently released for the NES the Super Mario Brothers 3, and then in 91 Super Mario World on the Super Nintendo. And Sega had just come out with the Genesis, and Sega was looking to compete with directly compete with Nintendo. They had already released a console called the what was it? So the Genesis was known as the Mega Drive in Japan, and before that they had the Sega Master System, which was kind of like Sega's equivalent to the NES. It was the 8-bit. It was a third generation 8-bit console, whereas the Mega Drive was the fourth generation 16-bit console. But the Master System was not nearly as popular as the Nintendo Entertainment System, and most people, when you think of the third generation consoles, you think immediately of the Nintendo Entertainment System because it was like literally the number one console at that time. So Sega came out with the Sega Genesis, and their whole marketing strategy was to completely like defeat Nintendo. Like Nintendo became their like target.
Right. And that
And
showed in commercials, that showed
yes,
in all of their marketing material. Like the trademark was Sega does or Genesis does what Nintendo don't.
correct.
So that was pretty much all that you could see, and they would get more mainstream celebrities, and they would also get like just various athletes, NBA players, and such to to appear in their commercials for the Genesis, because like just to show that this was for the big boys. This was for
Yes.
like the real gamers. This was for the main. This was bigger and better than Nintendo, and it was to show. It was basically their way of saying, well, Nintendo's for kids, but if you want to play the really good games, you're gonna want Sega.
Right.
And we talked about this on the I believe it was the Sega.
Sega CD episode.
Yes, that's what it was, which
Yeah.
was a very long time ago. One of our earlier ones, if you want to check that out. The
Yeah.
audio was primitive, so you've been warned.
Yeah.
Or at least compared to now, which some would still say is primitive, but they can go fuck themselves. Anyway, what we previously said in that episode was if a lot of the times a person would have would have a Nintendo or a Sega console, and later a Sony console, depending on the size of their family. Really, for the most part, like you would most if they were only children, or if they were younger kids, but they were the eldest, then you would see more Nintendos, and more families would have Nintendos. But if they had an older brother or an older sister, they would usually have a Sega.
Mm-hmm.
Just because it would always go to, well, the family has to get a console. The eldest one wants a Genesis, and that'll keep them out of trouble, so we'll get that instead of Nintendo. And that's kind of the way that it was in a lot of households. We didn't really, if you were rich, then you would get both, but you didn't really see that too much. It was usually one or the other, and they would usually stick with that specific brand forever, basically.
Yeah. And that was until Sega eventually folded or stopped making consoles and just stuck exclusively to video games, and they just would license them to other
Right.
companies. But yeah,
We'll get to that.
Yeah. So Sega is looking to dethrone Nintendo at this point, and they needed a mascot to do that. Originally, Sega's original plan was to have Alex Kidd be their mascot, but Alex Kidd was not as successful. They were finding Mario was still more popular. So they turned to Yuji Naka, Naoto Oshima, and Hirokazu Yasuhara, who came up with this character of Sonic the Hedgehog, who was supposed to appeal more to American audiences.
Right.
It was thought that, Mario was kind of like this old plumber, so they wanted to make someone that was like cool and sleek. And so they came up with Sonic, who was a blue hedgehog, who could run super fast and also roll into a ball.
Right. He wasn't the original idea, though. They had a lot of different designs, and some of them were Eggman, some of them were, well, at least early designs of Eggman. They also had him as an armadillo, and they also had him as a rabbit, and they would later use all of those characters in various games, but they had a few different options, and they went down to New York City, and there was a trip that they took a trip in New York City, and they just this was more Naito Oshima, and he took the designs with him to New York City. I don't know if he was there on business or pleasure, but he took the designs with him, and he sat down in Central Park, and he just started asking people who were just walking by, as they so often do. He was just like, "Hey, can I just ask you a quick question? Which one of these characters do you like? Which drawing is your favorite?"
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time they went, most people went with Sonic, and they just kept saying, "Oh, we like the Hedgehog, we like the Hedgehog, we like the Hedgehog," and I think second in command was Eggman, who he wanted to use anyway, but he used him as the villain, and that poll of just direct feedback, just that made the decision easy for them, and they just said, okay, well, he came back to Japan, he said, well, I asked 100 people in New York City which one of these characters they liked, and they all liked the Hedgehog, so let's do the Hedgehog, and it just kind of started from there.
Yes. Yeah, and so yeah, and they did end up picking the design for Eggman to be the villain of Dr. Robotnik. So the thing, when they finally did release Sonic the Hedgehog, it really kind of blew people away because of how different it was to Mario, because Mario is a platforming game. There's a lot of jumping. There's a lot of jumping from platform to platform. Sonic, though, is fast. You're running the entire time. You're going over loops and all that, and it was completely different. So it really blew people away when it first came out because it was so much different. And in a lot of ways, Sonic started to become the more popular franchise at that time.
Yes.
It was it was almost like if you you could make a comparison of Sega and Nintendo to WWE and WCW, how during the Attitude Era, WCW was actually winning some of the Monday Night Raw or the Monday Night War for quite some time before they finally started making stupid decisions and putting friggin' Vince Russo in charge of creative. A similar thing happened with Sega, where Sega started to kind of get the edge in the console war a little bit because Sonic was such a cooler mascot compared to Mario at the time.
Right.
And the gameplay was just so much different and so much faster, and it had the not to say that the music in the Mario games is bad, but it's compared to the music in Sonic was different. It was it was upbeat and jumpy and had it was kind of and in fact they actually
the music was faster too. The music matched the pacing of the game.
Exactly. And they had a lot of it was interesting because they did a lot of different things with the music. Like, you have like certain songs that are more like, kind of like rock orientated, and then you have like songs that are like from Sonic 2, the chemical plant zone. It's almost like kind of has like this funk to it. It's almost like a funk song.
Yeah, they tried to match the music to the
Yes,
atmosphere, and I think
yes,
that they nailed it for the most part.
yeah, they definitely did.
Even when Sonic is even when he's swimming and you have to get above water and it suddenly turns into like almost like the Jaws theme, like there's the impending dread right there where you're like, oh
Yeah.
God, I really have to do something, and like your anxiety shoots through the roof because you're like, I can't die, I can't die right now, and like it's so like it creates the urgency, and it was like just brilliantly done.
Yeah.
And like the other thing was that just like not even that the game played differently and that the music was like spot on and that the character worked and connected with people, but also Nintendo's biggest edge was that they had twice the amount of bits that a Sega Genesis had. Like a Sega Genesis could only do 16 bits, where where Super Nintendo could do 32 bits. So
Right.
Nintendo was just basically like, well, we're obviously the superior console. Look at how many more colors we have.
Mhm.
And Sega was like, okay, well, it's not what it's not how many colors you have, it's what you can do with it. Where
Right.
this has to go to, and like the color is beautiful. It's very vibrant, it's fast.
Yeah.
Everything looks as it should, and it moves like a roller coaster, which is just that was never really done before. So it
Yes.
was really innovative as a faster side scroller that did that and made you it really took you for a ride. And on top of that, because he could jump and roll into a ball, it was only a one button game, so anybody could play it no matter
Yeah.
what age you were in. And he could roll into a ball as soon as you hit the jump button, and his momentum would never stop. So you really felt
Yes.
like nothing was going to stop this guy.
Mhm.
And but a lot of that marketing and like even the Nintendo Attack ads, and also the like when Sega would be bundled with Sonic, the
Yes.
Japanese the Japanese businessmen did not understand this and really hated the idea.
Mhm.
Because in Japan, now this is more of a cultural situation because I don't know if it still works this way, but at the time, the bonus structures were very different. Where America, the bonus structure would be, you'd get a bonus at the end of the year. Sometimes you get it sometimes you get it early in the first quarter, but you would usually get it at the end of the year. You'd get your holiday bonus, and
Right.
then you'd go Christmas shopping or holiday shopping or whatever it is that you'd celebrate. You would just buy stuff. You would go get your toys and like things for your spouse or whatever it is, and so you'd only so they would so they'd pack so the idea was to package Sonic with the Genesis for Christmas.
Yeah.
In Japan, at the time, the bonus structure was you would get it you would get a bonus multiple times a year. You'd get multiple bonuses of like throughout the course of a year. So
Mhm.
you would get like let's just say you'd get a quarterly bonus as opposed to an annual bonus. Just for the sake of the argument, so every 3 months you get a bonus, so you could keep buying. So like every 3 months you'll buy a new game or a new console or whatever. So that's why the Japanese businessmen didn't understand why anybody would just give a game away for free. But they let him do it because they felt that this would be that because Sega firmly believed that America was the place to go if they wanted the Genesis and Sonic to succeed.
Yeah.
So they said, okay, we think that this is a bad idea, but we'll let you do it because you seem to know the market better than we do.
Uh-huh.
So they did, and it was a hit. And a lot of that marketing, well, all of that marketing has to go to Tom Kalinske, who was the head of marketing at the time for Sega, and he was the one behind the anti-Nintendo things. He was the one behind the screaming Sega stuff. Where like anything that you saw when you got a Sega Genesis, it was Sega. That was Tom,
Yeah.
and just like all of these crazy ideas, including putting Sonic bundled with the consoles, which even that you didn't really see too much at the time either.
Right.
That was all him. So this guy is like a marketing legend,
Hmm.
and rightfully so. So he's could be one of the guys who put Sonic on the map from a marketing perspective, but also with the sprites thing, this was a very ballsy move. So there was a journalist before Sonic came out, and there was a journalist doing a report for either Nintendo Power or maybe not Nintendo Power, but who was doing an article for like just Game Informer or some gaming publication. Maybe it was I want to say that it was GamePro, but I could be wrong. I want to say it was GamePro. Rest in peace. That was a great magazine. I want to say it was GamePro, and he was interviewing. He was like doing a write up on like the Genesis for the holiday or whatever, and for the holiday issue, and like people are talking about like about some of the games that you're going to put out and this mascot and everything, and he's like, and the journalist asked the question to Tom Kalinske, and he's like, the thing is, the Genesis only has 16 bits, and the Nintendo and the Super Nintendo has the 32 bits. So like, you don't have enough. You don't have as many color options. So Tom Kalinske just motions for the guy to come into a room, and this was before Sonic hit shelves. He motions for the guy to come into a room. Doesn't say a word. He comes into a room, and there are two TVs. One has a Super Nintendo set up with Mario. The other one has a Sega Genesis set up with Sonic pre-release. No one else had really seen it outside of Sega at the time. And he says, I want you to play both of these games, and then I want you to tell me which one has more color. And the journalist was astounded and said, how did you do this with the Sonic game? And it's because they distributed all of their colors in the right way. And they made sure that, well, okay, if we don't have enough colors, then let's make the most out of all the colors that we have. And that's a long-winded way of why the game is so beautiful. And also they included the Flickies, which the Flickies have an earlier game of their own.
Yeah.
Which in the Sonic Mega Collection, you can play the original Flicky game, where it's just you're a bird trying to get the other, you're trying to get your other like woodland critters home, basically.
Yeah. Which was always like it was always part of
the. Sorry, see what you were going to say. We were going to say the same thing.
Like, kind of part of like the objective of Sonic is so like Eggman has like created all these robots that you have to defeat, and he like basically took like all of the like animals and creatures from like where you are, and like put them inside the robots to like power them or something. It's not really. I don't think it's ever really explained why he puts the animals inside the robots.
No, it kind of just seems like he's either doing it to piss Sonic off so he can destroy him, or he can, or he's just
supposed to turn everything into robots,
them.
all the living things into robots, essentially.
Yeah, basically, him and Dr. Wily should have a beer together.
Yeah.
Well, they probably have.
Well, now that's Super Smash Brothers, because like they combined all the different franchises into the same thing. So
Right. Well, again, we'll get to that later.
Yeah. So every time you hit an enemy, like a little animal pops out of it, and at the end of the level, there's a like a big capsule that you have to hit the button on the top, and it like bursts open, and all the animals are freed, basically.
Right.
So it's always it was always part of like the Sonic franchise and the Sonic lore that you're saving the animals from these robots.
Right. And also Sonic gets his power from from the rings, and
yes,
you have to collect all of the rings so that you don't die, basically. And the more rings that you get, then you're able to access a bonus stage and get more lives and all that stuff.
Yes.
But yeah, so 91 hits and Sonic flies off the shelves. Like it acts at the time, and for many years it was I believe in the Sega magazine, it was the highest rated game for many years of all time. because it is like as simple as it is. It's a it's a near perfect game, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. I mean, it you know, it's 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 fun. It doesn't feel floaty, and like you could like really like you plow through the levels like super fast, and it's but like if you take your time and kind of learn the levels, there's like a whole bunch of different secrets and branching paths that you could take. It's not just like a linear thing. Like
Correct.
they have basically like the standard, like if you run in one direction, yeah, this is like the path you'll take. But if you know like what you're doing and where all the secrets are, you could kind of take like a different path to the end and like get like different bonuses and stuff. Which was pretty impressive for the time that they had like these big levels, even for a side scroller. That you could get all these bonuses and different things, because that wasn't really like as like obviously like Mario had some of that too, but it wasn't really, I don't think, nearly as pronounced in Mario as it was in Sonic.
Right. Which this may well I don't well, did Metroid come out after this? I'm pretty sure it
Yeah.
did. So maybe
Well,
this
no,
was
Metroid 1 came out in the 80s, the original Metroid,
okay.
so
Never
yeah.
mind then.
But that's a
But
different type of
still,
game though.
yes, it
Metroid was not
is.
a platforming game. It was like, an adventure exploration game. So it was like
Right,
purposely
right.
like, more open-ended like that. For a platforming game to have such an open-ended level, that was not common at the time.
Right. Well, this even wouldn't well, you couldn't even really consider it to be a platformer because he's not really jumping, he's not really doing the
I mean, it's
platform
it's a
stuff.
platformer.
It
It fits the definition of a platforming game,
yes,
despite the fact that it's not a traditional platformer that you would,
yes, in a technical sense, it would be a platformer,
yes.
but I think the point of this was like so that people could say, "Wow, this isn't what a platformer is supposed to be."
Right.
So it was innovative for its time.
Yes.
It was very innovative, and just all of these things just were into the right thing at the right time, and
Uh-huh.
they actually did really well. Like between the first like for this first game and eventually it just got it just could not stop getting over with people
Yeah. Well, and there was a
and
natural
I think it
progression
and I
with
think
the
it was
games.
I think it became the game of the year too for 91.
Yeah. And so, there was a natural progression with the sequels. Like each sequel added like a whole new slew of things. Like Sonic 2 introduced Tails, which was Sonic's sidekick.
Right.
Um,
And original and people they did want a Sega they did want a two-player component with the first
right,
one, but there just wasn't enough power to do that.
right.
Um, but what I was going to say was Sonic's success actually helped propel Sega to beat Nintendo in the market, and they got
Yep.
65% of the market share.
Yes.
So, all of his crazy ideas, I'm sure all those Japanese businessmen were like, holy crap, this guy Tom actually knows what he's talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and the success continued throughout the 90s. Like I said, you had Sonic 2, which introduced Tails, and also gave you the ability to actually spin dash. So in the original, Sonic could not spin dash. If you wanted, you could roll into the ball, but you had to be moving forward to do it. Sonic 2 introduced the spin dash, which is like you would duck down and then hit the jump button, and Sonic would charge up his spin, and then like you would let it go and fly ahead.
Yep.
So that was added a whole new gameplay mechanic, which was really cool. And then obviously they're having success with that. Sega released the the Sega CD peripheral for the Genesis, and they came out naturally with a CD Sonic game, which was Sonic CD, which is often cited as the best Sonic game ever made. And it is very good. Sonic CD added also a number of new characters. It introduced Amy Rose. It introduced Metal Sonic, and the environments were beautiful. And the cool thing about Sonic CD is because it was on the Sega CD peripheral, it had the full motion video capability. And the cutscenes of Sonic CD are probably the most memorable things because it was almost like a full blown like Sonic anime that you were watching, you know, and in between the levels. And of course, they had the theme song Sonic Boom, which became hugely popular.
Yep.
So it was really like a game changer, and it's like cited to this day as the best Sonic game, at least in the best 2D Sonic game, I would say. Where so that came out, and then of course you had Sonic 3. Now Sonic 3 was interesting because gameplay wise in development, it was originally, so it introduced Knuckles, which is Sonic's he became Sonic's rival initially, and then later kind of an ally. I like to like compare Knuckles to like Vegeta, like like if Sonic is Goku, Knuckles is Vegeta, kind of thing. Like
Yeah, I
starting
think
out
that's
as an
fair.
enemy, became a friend later on.
Yep.
So originally Sonic 3 and Knuckles, like it was actually supposed to be Sonic the Hedgehog 3 was supposed to, and Sonic and Knuckles were supposed to be one game. But they were finding that it was too much to put on one cart, and they were running out of time. So what they did was they split it into two games. They made Sonic the Hedgehog 3, and then later on released Sonic and Knuckles, which Sonic and Knuckles was this whole new game on its own where you could actually play as Knuckles.
Yep.
And the cool
That's
thing
a
was,
lot of people's favorites.
yeah, Sonic and Knuckles was great. And the cool thing about Sonic and Knuckles was you could actually attach Sonic 2 or Sonic 3 to the top of the cartridge and play those games with Knuckles. So that was like that was like nothing that had been done like that ever before. Like that was such a new thing, and it was awesome, and it was so popular.
I didn't know that, actually.
Yeah.
Yes. You can probably tell by now that I was a Nintendo household, but
Yeah.
I didn't know. I had played most of these games sporadically at friends' houses who had Segas, but
Yeah.
it wasn't really too many because I didn't know too many kids who had elder siblings. But I didn't know that, actually.
Yeah.
That's,
Another interesting little anecdote about Sonic 3 is that when Sega was developing Sonic 3, they originally contracted Michael Jackson to do the soundtrack.
yeah.
And he had written a number of songs for the game. And this was originally around the time of the first child abuse allegations that came out against him. And so, he ended up being acquitted or whatever of it. It like ended up not being like going forward, but Sega didn't want the negative press that kind of entailed, so they dropped Michael Jackson. But
I could understand that.
it was alleged for many years that they still used his music, and I think it was actually recently confirmed by someone who worked at Sega at the time that they did end up using some of his songs without his permission.
Oh, wow.
And it kind of just never went anywhere. Like I guess like Michael Jackson just never sued them or like went after them about it, but they actually did.
He may have just been too busy to like focus on that.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
it may have just been like a happy accident that like he never played the game and never noticed.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, if I were in his shoes, I probably, with all these other things going on, plus tours and albums and God knows whatever was going on in his life, the last thing on my mind would be, what about that? I wonder what happened with that video game that I was supposed to do the music for.
Right.
Like, I don't even think that would have entered my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. So
they got lucky there.
Yeah, they did. So at this point now, Sonic had become Sega's flagship franchise. It was huge. There was cartoons. There was the Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon by Deke, which was really cool. That was like the classic Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon that everybody kind of remembers, I think.
Using
that was
Steve Urkel of all people to be the voice of Sonic.
Yeah, which was pretty funny. And then
I remember it blew my mind when I found out that was the same guy.
Yeah. And then there was another Sonic show that was more based on the comic books. which had
Yes.
like Princess Sally and stuff like that, and all these other characters that weren't in actually any of the games that they introduced solely for the comic books and then later
I
for
had
the
I had
show.
a couple of Sonic issues growing up.
Yeah, I did too. I remember once, I don't know I think we were picking somebody up at the airport. I don't remember. I was a very young child. I was probably 5 or 6 years old. And I remember I had to go with with my mom to pick like somebody up at the airport, and it was like nighttime, and I me being a young kid, I was like really bored. So we went into the magazine store in the airport, and I remember getting like one of the original Archie comics, Sonic comics, and I sat there and like read it, in the airport while we were waiting for the plane to land or whatever. And that's just like one memory that's kind of burned in my head. And I had that comic for I lost it now, but I had it for many years after that.
Oh yeah, that my Sonic issues are lost to time too.
Yeah,
They're probably in landfill somewhere.
I'm
But
sure. Yeah.
yeah, we used to have this comic book shop a few blocks away from my childhood home. So like, and my dad was collecting a lot of comic books at the time um, because there were just so many popular stories going on at that time. There was the death of Superman.
Oh yeah. Yep.
There was Nightfall.
Mhm.
And also Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man was taking off with like Venom and everything, which I have to go to their house and see if we have the first appearance of Venom. We might, but I don't know for sure. I know we have the first appearance of Carnage.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's besides the point. He every now, but he would take me to the comic shop with him because, it was one, a chance to bond with his son, and another, just he was going to get comics, so he needed an excuse to get out of the house. And he figured, well, my son likes comics anyway because we read them together. So let's go. And, we would go and he'd get me a comic book, and it was usually a Sonic or like just something like kitty, like it was either Sonic or like or like sometimes when I got a little older they had Goosebumps ones. I think there was a Goosebumps one at one point. And they had a Pikachu one. They had a Pokemon comic book. It was
Hmm.
Pikachu Electric Boogaloo. But yeah, I used to have
I remember that one. I
I
remember that
used
one.
I used to have quite a bit of those books, and
Yeah.
they're no longer. Oh no, it was Gargoyles that I would get.
Oh yeah.
That's what it was. It was Gargoyles, and it was Sonic, and it was that, and I had a few of those things. Every now and then, I'd get like a Spider-Man, but like it was, but like I had a few of those, and I don't know, they were a lot of fun to read. But
Yeah.
I loved watching the cartoon on I believe it was Sunday mornings that it would come out on Channel 4.
Hmm.
But yeah, it was fun times.
Yeah.
We'll have to talk about the cartoon at another point
Yeah.
in
The
time.
cartoon could be its own episode, and it's
Yeah, because
like
there's been so
it's
many
just
Sonic cartoons in general
yeah.
that could be its whole separate issue.
Yeah, there was the original Sonic cartoon, the one with Princess Sally. There was Sonic X, which came out in the later 2000s. There was Sonic Underground, which was another cool one. That was an interesting one,
Hmm.
Sonic Underground, because it was kind of its own whole story and world that they created, which was
Oh wow.
really interesting.
I only ever
Um,
watched the original, so I'm not familiar with those.
yeah, Sonic Underground was cool because they also had they introduced Sonic had siblings in that one, and they all had their own musical instruments, and they would like form a band.
Well,
And it was like
so
this post-apocalyptic world where like Eggman won and was like the
huh.
ruler of the world basically. And so like
Wow.
they were kind of it was like really ahead of its time because it was kind of like what like like dark,
I
and
might
like
want to check that out. That
yeah,
sounds cool.
it was pretty cool. But so Sonic at this point was the top of the world. This is the mid 90s now, and Sega was they started releasing some spin-offs which were not as well received. You had Knuckles Chaotix, which on the 32X, which is from what I understand was not a bad game. It was actually received well by critics, but the problem was that basically nobody had a 32X, so
Hmm.
not a lot of people played it. um and then, eventually Sega scrapped the 32X altogether, and they went on to the Sega Saturn. Now the Saturn did not have any mainline Sonic games. They were developed. Oh, I should also mention before they went to the Saturn, they did release Sonic 3D Blast on the Genesis in 1996, which was okay. The 3D technology was not great. It's like on an isometric perspective, and I just think it's not really conducive to a good Sonic game because it felt like too like you didn't have much control on hills and stuff, and it was just like the directions didn't feel right.
Mhm.
So I don't think it worked as well. I know a lot of people have fond memories of Sonic 3D Blast. I think it was okay. I didn't think it was the greatest. So Sega releases the Sega Saturn in, let's see, I forget what year exactly that was. Excuse me. Uh, let's see, Saturn. So the Saturn came out in 94 in Japan and 95 in North America. And like I said, they were developing a mainline Sonic game for the Sega Saturn, but it was never released. It got delayed, and I think eventually it became Sonic Adventure on the Dreamcast. The Sonic games that we did get on the Sega Saturn were spin-off racing games like Sonic R and I think Sonic Drift. The Sonic Drift might have been on the Game Gear if I remember correctly. Let's take.
Oh, I just want to go back a little bit,
Yeah.
just to the
Go ahead,
music.
because I'm trying to find this. So
Okay,
say what you got to say.
this is something I should have mentioned a little bit before, but while we were on the music, but the composer for the Sega Mega Drive games Sonic the Hedgehog and Sonic 2 was is Masato Nakamura, and he he actually is a extremely prolific musician in his own right. He's part of this band called Dreams Come True, where he's the bass player, but he is a they're like they're one of the top five, I think, artists in Japanese music history.
Yeah.
They're like they've been extremely like well received. They've done music for like Disney and stuff. They've like he's just been very successful in both of these realms, in video gaming and just music in general. But the name of the band is called Dreams Come True, and they have 18 albums actually, and like they're yeah. So I just wanted to say that like they've got an excellent those games. The music in those games are great because they have a great person who understands exactly what something needs, and someone who really cares about this product and just cares about music in general to compose the soundtrack. So it's great because the person composing it is great.
Yeah.
To say it in the simplest terms.
Yeah.
Also, they also did the soundtrack for countless other video games like Nights into Dreams, which was something else that that the Sonic team has worked on.
Another and very much Sonic adjacent. There's a lot of Nights into Dreams references in Sonic games, especially later Sonic games like Sonic Adventure. So a Sonic adjacent game, definitely.
Yes, which we'll have to talk about that at another point in time.
Yeah.
I've never played that game, but
I've never either.
I've heard that it's a really great one.
Yeah. So Sega started releasing more spin-offs. They were still working on mainline Sonic games, but they were kind of stuck in development hell. So instead, they started doing some spin-offs. And you had stuff like Sonic Spinball, no pun intended, which was a pinball game that came out for the Genesis. And that was great. Sonic Spinball was one of my favorite Sonic games.
That's a lot of fun. That one, I could do that one for hours.
It's incredibly hard, and I never really got far in it, but it was a fun game to play. Because it added, like, you had the pinball element, but also was like also some platforming involved too. Like you could actually control Sonic and walk around but he was also the pinball. So it was an interesting concept. Then there were some not so good. Sonic
ever since that,
games.
There's a lot of other franchises have had pinball related games like Pokemon Pinball.
Yeah,
that's a fun one too.
Yes, it was. But yeah, so there was also some not so good Sonic spin-off games. Sonic R was a racing game that came out on the Saturn, and it was very, very stiff controls. Didn't really make a lot of sense. It wasn't like a linear racing game where you actually, like, just race till the end. There was like things you had to collect in the level, and if you didn't collect them, you weren't able to get through. It was a really weird thing because you had to do all the shit and also win the race. So it was very, very poorly received. The tracks were not good. They were like very convoluted, and just didn't make any sense. And I think they were trying to make it like a racing game with the feel of still being a Sonic game. Because Sonic is just running. It's not like a kart racer. There were a couple characters that had karts, like I think Amy Rose is in a kart or something like that. But Sonic was like actually just running, and it was just not well.
That's kind of weird.
Yeah, it was not a well executed game.
Like, I get the idea and I understand the concept that like Sonic doesn't need a cart because he's already fast, and it's like kind of redundant. But if everybody else has one, then it's kind of like, well, it almost looks unfinished.
Yeah. It got mixed reviews from critics. Looking back on it, it does not really hold up. I played it on, they had the compilation, the Sonic Gems collection and the Sonic Mega collection. I think it was on Sonic Gems collection, and it was not good. It did not hold up, after years. They also had a fighting game on the Sega Saturn called Sonic the Fighters.
Really?
Yeah. Which was it was very heavily based, I think, on Virtua Fighter, but again, it was very like stiff controls, kind of floaty. Like you would jump and like fly up into the sky and like fall down in slow motion. It was like very strange. They also like used a couple of like weird characters that were very obscure. Like they had like Espeon in there, and like the weird like there was like a weird like dingo guy that was only in one of the Game Gear games and never in any other Sonic game. So there was a lot of weird, and there was a polar bear character. It was very strange. And it just wasn't that good of a fighting game. Again, it was kind of, I think, mixed reviews when it came out, and looking back on it, it was not it's not well, not well remembered. It did not hold up. So, largely I think the Sega Saturn largely failed as a console. It was a little too ahead of its time, and it was at a time when like people were starting to go into 64-bit consoles, and the Sega Saturn was only a 32-bit console.
And so they ended up getting the same issue that they had in the first place, but they couldn't really do anything about it.
Exactly. And this was the point where like bits were actually starting to make a difference. Like, when the Genesis came out and you had the Super Nintendo, the Super Nintendo was technically a little bit more powerful and graphically, but like you still had really good games on the Genesis. And I think by the time that the Saturn came out, you already had the PlayStation, which had amazing games. The Nintendo 64 came out, which had amazing games. And the Saturn, they just could not keep up. They could not get good games out. The technology was not as good. So the graphics were not nearly as good. And it kind of failed as a console. Then Sega came out with the Dreamcast. Now, the Dreamcast was an interesting one because the Dreamcast...
I think the Dreamcast needs its own episode at some point too.
Yes, it does, because I liked the Dreamcast. I still have my Dreamcast.
Everyone I know that ever had a Dreamcast loved it.
It had a lot
of everyone was sad that it didn't make it.
Yeah, I was disappointed that it didn't make it because it had great games. It had really good graphics that were way ahead of its time. It had like equivalent of like GameCube graphics, but it was in like the N64 generation.
Yes, and it largely failed because it just there were a lot of there was a lot of turnover at the company. Sega in
Yes.
general was just not financially sound, and there were a lot of people in surprise upper management and executive management that had no clue what they were doing,
Yeah.
and they made a lot of bad decisions, and it almost killed Sega.
Yes.
And that's the main thing that killed Dreamcast, and also a lot of it didn't have enough exclusive support
Right.
of games, and that
Yes.
a lot of that is because of the shape that the company was in,
Yeah.
because there was just not enough people to do enough things, simply put, and you did get a couple of gems out of it, like the Sonic Adventure games,
Yes. So that I was
which
actually
are
going to get to
some of
that.
the games, which are some of the few games that kept the Dreamcast alive for a while,
Yes.
but that was really the problem, was any game that most games that you'd find on the Dreamcast you would find on any of the other platforms, so there
Yeah.
wasn't really any good reason to get
They,
that over any of the other ones,
I,
which had
well,
more
and
exclusive games.
Dreamcast did have a few really good exclusives that were like, that I wish they would do remakes of, because they were like the Power Stone franchise was fucking awesome, amazing fighting games. And there was two, Power Stone 1 and 2, both on the Dreamcast. They were both great. I wish they would port them to something else, or remake them or do something, because they were awesome.
Yeah,
But Sonic Adventure,
and they had WWF Royal Rumble, which at
yes,
the time, like it had the most wrestlers that would appear on screen at the time
uh-huh.
that you could put in the ring, which I think was like 9 or something. It was a lot.
And you had the home port of House of the Dead 1 and 2, which was
Yes.
awesome to have it on a home console, because it was the arcade game, 100%,
Yeah.
except on a home console. And same thing with Crazy Taxi. Like, you had
Yeah.
Crazy Taxi was later ported to other consoles, but originally it was a Dreamcast exclusive, and it was the arcade game. And you had the soundtrack, you had the Offspring. Like, really, the only games that had like actual bands at the time were like the Tony Hawk games. So it was amazing that you actually had a game on console, Dreamcast, that was a friggin' awesome arcade game. It was 100% port, like 100% no cutback at all, and you had the soundtrack of the Offspring. It was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But Sonic Adventure was really the flagship title of the console. And Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 are sometimes they're definitely the best 3D Sonic games. I haven't played some of the newer ones. I heard some of the newer ones are okay. But as they were probably the last two great Sonic games that everyone talks about.
Yeah.
Sonic Adventure 1 and 2.
I think around this time was when they started moving the Sonic games to America, and
Yes.
creating the Sonic Team US.
Yes. And they became Sonic Team. I think was like the first game that was actually under the Sonic Team development banner was, I think, Sonic Adventure.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when I first played Sonic Adventure, like, I was blown away by the intro movie was just like, so like, you're like, holy crap. Like, first of all, the graphics were amazing for the time.
Oh yeah.
Second of all, like, the soundtrack, like, you have Crush 40, who were kind of like almost like the in-house band at Sega, like, and they did the soundtrack. They did the main theme for Sonic Adventure 1, 2, and Sonic Heroes, and I think they did some of the other songs as well.
Mm-hmm.
And like, it was like you were like blown away by it because how good the friggin' music was. Like, it was like, how is this a Sonic game? Like, this music, like, not to say that previous Sonic games had bad music, but like, this was like a real band with a real song, and it was the theme song of a Sonic game.
Yeah, it was just something totally different that you never got before.
Yeah. And it reminded me a lot of like almost like 90s Megadeth, like Euthanasia era Megadeth in some ways.
Kind of. There, you could hear the influence there.
Yeah.
I mean, all of these Dreamcast games I played in. I played not on a Dreamcast. Like I played a lot of them in arcades because they were that powerful where they could do that.
Yes.
So like Sonic Adventure, I would do grinding competitions with people at like fun. All of these things were probably played mostly at Funtime USA and a little bit in Coney Island. But rest in peace, Funtime USA. What a beautiful place. It is now a storage unit facility. Sad.
Lame.
Yeah, really lame. But it was a wonderful place. I'm glad that I got to be there. I, anyway, that deserves its own episode as well, or really
Yeah.
just like you know arcades and places to go in the 90s.
Yeah.
But we'll do that another time.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, Sonic, and the cool thing, Sonic Adventure, what the cool thing was about it, it was the first, obviously, like I think true 3D Sonic game, because you could say Sonic 3D Blast, but it doesn't compare. Like this was like the actual first 3D Sonic game, and they kind of, it was cool because you had like these hub worlds that you could kind of explore in between the levels. Like it had Station Square, which was the city, and then like the ancient ruins or something. I forget what it was actually called. But you took a train to get there, and it was like you could like walk around and explore things. And also like you had to find all these like equipment pickups to get Sonic new abilities, like the light speed dash and all these different abilities you could get, which was really cool. And it also, which was had like a bunch of different characters that you play, and each character had their own interlocking story. And once you beat every single character's story, then you would have the final story, which is where you actually get to turn into Supersonic and defeat Perfect Chaos. You know,
Mhm.
just like it was such a great game. Like the storyline was amazing, the characters were cool, the gameplay was fun. It was just like the perfect Sonic game at the time, and
Right.
way ahead of its time.
Oh yeah, and also introduced us to really like the Team Chaotix and
Yes.
Shadow.
Yes.
And
Well, yes.
Shadow was just beloved by everyone, where
Yeah.
he
So
even got his own game for a minute too.
yeah, yeah. So that was Sonic Adventure 2, which kind of like expanded on the greatness of Sonic Adventure. And the cool thing that was always about Sonic Adventure 2 is how, so Sonic Adventure 1 had the Chow Garden, where you had like this little pet thing called a Chow that you could raise, and like you could do little mini games with, and you could raise it up to be from an egg up to an adult. Sonic Adventure 2 really expanded on the Chow Garden concept, and actually the end game of Sonic Adventure 2 kind of became like collecting items so you could upgrade your chows. Like they really like went all out with the Chow Garden in Sonic Adventure 2. And like they had hero and villain chows. And I remember me and my friend, we would like we were trying to grind up our chows because you wanted to have like it was like the immortal chaos chow and the immortal something else. Like for the chaos chow was like the villain one, and then there was the good one. It was like the immortal angel chow, and it was like it was like almost like raising a Pokemon. You had to like you got and the cool thing was is that when you went into the levels, you got these little power things, and you could find animals. And they finally had a use for the animals, is that you could give them to your Chow and it would upgrade the Chow's certain abilities. Like if you gave them a seal, it would make them swim better,
Huh.
And like, so it was really cool the way they did that you could upgrade your Chow's ability. So, and it really added to the end game of Sonic Adventure 2. It made it so like you could play it for forever, because it's like, oh, well, now, I beat the game, beat the hero story, beat the villain story. I beat the final end story. And now I could go to any level and collect whatever I need so I can upgrade my chows and have the ultimate chow. So,
Cool.
that was like, again, another
So it's
groundbreaking thing at the time,
yeah, so
because
it's
really,
almost like a second game.
yes, exactly. And again, there wasn't really anything like that at the time. It was like so ahead of its time. And this is like the problem with, I think part of the problem with the Dreamcast is that it was too ahead of its time, you know? I think a lot of developers just didn't know what to do with it. And it's sad because it had so much potential, and you could see that, you could see the full potential of the Dreamcast in Sonic Adventure 2.
Well, for
Um,
years they had planned to work on Sonic Adventure 3, and there's a few There's a few great YouTube videos that I watched for research on this.
Yeah.
The History of Sonic: Birth of an Icon documentary. I don't know if it was made by this person, but the YouTuber I found was Kimplix.
Hmm.
I also found the Story of Sonic the Hedgehog documentary by Ginx, Ginx, as well as Sonic the Hedgehog 30th Anniversary Respected by GTV Japan. And also, this was my favorite, the History of Sonic's Bad Years documentary,
Hmm.
Collapse, Crunch, and the Chaos in the Early 2000s, The Golden Bolt, which we are getting into at this point. But
Yes.
that I highly recommend that the folks in media device land checking this out.
Yeah.
I highly recommend all of these YouTube documentaries that you can find. I'll put them in the links for the YouTube videos and I guess everything else if people for the curious minds who now who are now curious about this.
Hmm.
But yes, we so Sonic Adventure 3, there were plans to do that,
Yeah.
and I think that the turnover and the morale and everything at Sega just got so bad
Yeah. So what
that
happened was
they
because
ended
of
up canceling it.
the failure of the Dreamcast made Sega kind of restructure a little bit, and they decided they weren't going to make consoles anymore. They were going to become just a game developer. And so Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 eventually became ported to they became ported to pretty much everything, but initially it was just the GameCubes, which was interesting because Sega, eventually just capitulated to, it just shows the longevity of Nintendo and how like they really can't be beat, um,
Yeah, because
that
even
so
that at the time was like turned a lot of people's heads
yeah,
because they were like, "What is Sonic doing on a Nintendo?"
yes, and you had Sonic Adventure DX was the initial one, and then of course Sonic Adventure 2 Battle was the Sonic Adventure 2 port, and they
Right,
added extra features to each of
which the
them.
interesting thing about DX was supposed to be known as the director's cut of the game,
Yeah,
where the original director of Sonic Adventure 2 was not involved at all.
yeah,
So it wasn't even really a director's cut. It was just like just more stuff,
yeah,
really.
yeah. I mean, they did add stuff to that. They added stuff to Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. They really expanded. They expanded the multiplayer a lot in that,
Yeah.
which was cool. Um, But so this was kind of like the downfall of Sonic. Now, Sonic Heroes came out a couple of years later, which was the next game in the mainline Sonic game. I played it. I didn't have it myself. My brother had it, and so I played it with him growing up. I didn't really like it that much. It was okay. It wasn't terrible. It was just okay.
Yeah, it could
Um,
have they could have been a lot better with a lot of the direction and the design of and well, it was really the direction that like was mostly problematic because you had four campaigns and you didn't know that
yes,
you were supposed to that they were of varying difficulties,
right.
and for whatever reason they didn't specify at all. They like kind of specify they kind of mentioned it in interviews, but loosely. They didn't like outright say, "Oh, well, you have to do this campaign first." They kind of just alluded to it as like, "Oh, well, this campaign is more for hero." I'm sorry, they would say like this campaign is is more for beginners, and then you want to, and then if you're like a regular player, you want to do this campaign, which was Sonic and Tails and Knuckles, and if you want to do the harder campaign, it's this one, but. They didn't outright say that. They only said this one is for beginners, and nobody that didn't say anything when it doesn't even say beginner anywhere in the actual game. So if you
Hmm.
didn't see that interview, or if you didn't read the manual and like put two and two together, then you had no idea. But also the level design, what like a lot of people have had issues with the level design, and that's comes down to lack of manpower. There were two people working on the levels for the entire game,
Hmm.
and every level is different to each campaign.
Yeah.
And I think there's 16 levels in the game.
Mm-hmm.
for each campaign. So that's like 68. No, that's like 64. Yeah, I think that's 64 campaigns in total. Like that's 64 levels, and they're
Yeah.
all unique. And you had two people working on it for like 6 months, and then the second person fell ill, and they didn't continue.
Mm-hmm.
So it was one guy for like however long, and the guy was super stressed out. This is in the Bad Years documentary. The guy was super stressed out, and he he lost 20 pounds just from like crunching and stress. He didn't sleep. He didn't do anything. He didn't check out any other games, and it was just like a year of hell for this poor guy. And he didn't he had no idea what to do. And one of the later games, he got the idea because like while he was recovering, he was playing a different game, and he
Mm-hmm.
got the idea. The both games escape me right now. Maybe they'll come back to me, but it's just wild that like it almost killed this poor guy.
Yeah.
But as you were with Sonic Heroes,
Yeah. So it was, like I said, it was an okay game. You also had around the same time, a couple years. Well, it was like a couple of years later. You had Shadow the Hedgehog, which was actually very highly anticipated because Shadow was a popular character. And like you said before, introduced in Sonic Adventure 2. Um, but so it was kind of like interesting because they teased gameplay footage and they teased like scenes of it, and it was like there was like guns and vehicles. And people were like, what the hell? This is a Sonic game. Why is this a thing? So people were kind of like, okay, well, let's see how it is. And so the game came out, and it was mediocre. It was basically just another like 3D generic Sonic game. The levels were very linear. The guns and the vehicles were like just added just for like to be edgy, kind of like it was like,
I
oh look, Shadow's such an edge lord, he has guns and he drives a motorcycle. Like it was like really added nothing to the gameplay pretty much.
I just
um
don't understand why they needed to include guns in like a franchise
a
that
cartoon fucking
never
hedgehog.
a franchise that never ever has had a gun.
Yeah.
But okay. Um, Also, Shadow wasn't even supposed to get his own game. He
Yeah.
like they brought him back in Sonic Heroes, but but like when he like when he loses in Sonic Adventure 2, like and you get the happy ending and everything. That was supposed to be a final death. Like that was supposed to be it for Shadow.
Yeah.
That was supposed to be the completion of his arc, but he was so popular that they were like, okay, we have to bring him back.
Yeah. And now he's just been in the series, like he's just another character basically at this point.
Yeah.
um so yeah, it was I mean, I again, growing up, my brother really loved Sonic, so he had all these games. So I played Shadow the Hedgehog. I was not impressed by it. I was like, wow, this is kind of lame. And that was really my last foray into Sonic games, was Shadow the Hedgehog. I didn't really play any of the other ones after that. Um, and of course, the next game in the franchise is the dreaded Sonic 2006,
Oh God. It
which
is.
is largely uh stated as the worst Sonic game by far. Now,
Yes.
like I said, I didn't personally play this one, but I watched almost the entire Game Grumps Sonic '06 playthrough, and let me tell you, it is an awful, buggy mess. It was clearly rushed. Like, it's almost like a tech demo. And they actually made a joke about this on Game Grumps. That was like, imagine like, it's the developers and they bring it to like the bigwigs at Sega, and or like, as like a kind of like, oh, okay, this is like the game, and like they think it's good, and the big wigs are like, oh, great, this is a great tech demo, like Sonic running through an open world, so I can't wait to actually see the final product, and like the developers are kind of like looking at each other like, oh yeah, the final product, like because that is the final product,
Yeah,
it's
and you can't say that to
yeah,
to the developer.
yeah,
It was largely because they wanted to do something special for Sonic's 15th anniversary,
hmm,
and they pushed them to to get it out by a certain time, and
yeah,
also again Sega in dire straits. I'm not sure if it was I'm not sure if it was around this time or when the Dreamcast failed, but they were trying to merge at one point,
yeah,
and the merger fell through, and all these other things. It may have been at this point actually. This was possibly the lowest point in Sega's history,
yeah, yeah, it
and
really it was.
they this game proves it, and it shows you like as bad as the game is, that's about how bad the company was at this time.
Yeah, it was just, I mean, you couldn't really get worse than Sonic '06. Like between the glitches, the insanely long load times, like ridiculous. The like lack of like anything in the worlds, like literally everything is just empty. Like it's boring. The convoluted plot, like there's like a weird like fucking like almost like furry fetish plot because like Sonic has like a semi romance with like the female human character.
Yeah,
It's
it's
like,
weird. Which, fun
yeah,
fact, Sonic was originally supposed to have a human girlfriend named Madonna, and the Sonic team vetoed it because they were
yeah,
like, "No, that's weird."
yeah,
And Sega was like, "Okay, fine." And now they kind of were like, "Okay, that's for the best." But here they went back to that. Also, he was
yeah,
supposed to have a rock band too at the time, so I think that's where the show kind of borrows that, the show that you were talking about earlier that now I have
yeah,
to watch. But just thought about throwing that in there now that you mentioned that.
yeah.
But this was very weird, and it's just not good. If you want to see how bad this game was, either watch the Game Grumps episode like you did, or
Yeah.
watch the Angry Video Game Nerd Bad Sonic Games episode.
Yeah, the Game Grumps, it's like a whole series. They did like 80 something episodes, I think, and it's
Jesus.
hilarious. Like you have like just watch. It's probably like, so it was the original Game Grumps, Jontron and Ego Raptor, because it was the first year, and like it's just hilarious. Like some of the best moments of that era of Game Grumps happened during the Sonic
I
'06
mean, I
episode.
want to say that the Sonic 06 stuff is what really put them on the map.
Yes. Yeah, largely it is because that was like, there was the one big rant where like there was some glitch and like, like Aaron like flipped out about it. It was like it kind of went viral and all these like, people did like parody videos of it and stuff like that. So that was like, it was really like the big thing for Game Grumps, that those episodes. And of course they never finished it because John left the show before before they were able to finish it. But it was just those were the classic Game Grumps episodes. Um, so yeah, I didn't play it myself.
I mean, it's an unplayable game.
It is, it's terrible.
I think anyone who's actually been able to play it, it's like, I don't think that you could say that you've played the game with a straight face. It's like playing this is it's worse. It possibly is worse than Superman 64.
Yeah, it's definitely in that category of bad games.
Yeah,
Maybe not worse, but definitely up there with it.
it's in the top 10.
Yeah,
I can assure you.
and
If
like
such
it's
a
just like
list exists.
the plot is just so the plot reads like a really bad Sonic fanfic, which we'll get into later because the Sonic fandom is a little interesting to say the
Oh,
least.
I don't know about this, so
Oh my god, yeah. So, for those who don't know, Sonic has a very weird fandom. And if you want to kind of experience it firsthand, type in your first name and the Hedgehog in Google Images and
oh
see what comes
no.
up.
Oh, I'm doing
And you'll,
this.
yeah, you'll
I'm gonna.
see.
I'll share this on. I'll share this on our Facebook and in a YouTube post since we can do that now. I don't know why.
Yeah. Sonic for some reason became like the franchise of like weird furries to make their weird fanfics of and recolors.
Oh God!
Yes.
What the hell is this?
Yeah.
I don't even. I wouldn't even design a character like this.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, this is weird. Why am I blonde? I don't have blonde hair. I don't have much hair anymore anyway, but I'm like, yeah, this is, yeah, okay, so it's a, okay, there's a few different ones, but the first one that pops up is probably the one that I'll go with because it's the wackiest.
Yeah.
And there's multiple variants of this one. Okay,
Yeah.
so it's blonde with a green tuft in the front, and it wears a red headband, and it just has like, it's weird. I can't describe it any other way. It's also got on like purple and pink platform shoes.
Yeah. Yeah. So
I don't get it.
and then of course there's, like, if you really want to go through
Why is it wearing a sweater vest?
That's a good question. But if you really want to go down a rabbit hole,
I've never owned, let alone plan to own, a sweater vest, let alone a collection of sweater vests to necessitate a collection.
If you really want to go down a rabbit hole with the Sonic fandom and what horrors it spawned.
Oh, Christopher the Hedgehog looks a little bit more like something I would design, but why is he wearing a tie? I hate ties.
I suggest anybody who's interested look up Sonichu.
There's a Tron one called Chris Stryker the Hedgehog. I don't get this at all.
Yeah, there's a lot of fucked up ones, but Sonichu probably takes the cake for the most infamous Sonic recolor.
There's a Chris the Hedgehog that's green, and the caption is "I'm sexy," and I have to stop this. I can't look at this. Oh no, there's a humanoid version of this. Why did you introduce me to this? I have no words.
Now look up Sonichu.
Oh no.
And delve into the rabbit hole that is Chris Chan.
What? Oh no.
Chris Chan is probably the most famous lolcow on the internet.
What?
And is most known for his Sonic recolor, Sonichu.
Why would somebody make this?
It's a rabbit hole you have to go down because it leads to
fuck.
It leads to incest. Let me just say that right now. This rabbit hole.
Oh God, no.
Yes.
Why is there a sexy furry female version of this in a bikini?
Because it's cursed. Because the Sonic franchise is cursed. And for some reason, like, it became like a lot of like misfits and just people that are very strange latched on to Sonic the Hedgehog and like created their crazy fanfics all around Sonic. And it's probably the most fanfic franchise there is, I would say, is Sonic the Hedgehog.
This man is possessed.
It is out of control. It is led to like some of the weirdest, most like the creepiest things ever on the internet, basically.
Oh no. This is not good. Why would someone do this? Why would this catch on? Who's responsible for this catching on? I don't think I want to live in this world anymore. I think I want to get out of... I think I want to go to another dimension at this point. I think I'm ready.
Yeah.
I want to live in a world where Sonichu doesn't exist. That's all that I want. Yeah. And where Sonic, well, also, I guess while I'm out there, I might as well live in the same world where all of the bad Sonic games are good, and all of the good Sonic games are still good.
Yeah.
I want the Dreamcast to succeed. I also want to be born as the first trillionaire, just having the platinum spoon firmly coming out of my ass.
Well,
Um,
so I mean,
I got a list of demands for this universe I want to live in.
Sonic did have a fall from grace, in this time period, and it did kind of come back a little bit. So it's still kind of like in this like mixed like bag thing. Like there's still some kind of bad ones, but you had games like Sonic Generations that came out in 2011, which was largely loved by many people. Because it like it would kind of really harken back to the old school Sonic games that people loved, and that was like released as like the 20th anniversary of the original Sonic. So you actually play as like the original Sonic and the newer Sonic redesign as that was from Sonic Adventure on. So
Okay.
that was a cool thing. You also had more recently Sonic Mania, which was basically a remake. It was like a 16-bit Sonic game, except in modern times. And it's actually I
Didn't
haven't
people
played
like
it.
Didn't people like that one?
Yes, I haven't played it personally. I think I actually have it. I got it for free on Epic Game Store. I just haven't played it yet, but it is actually like very, very well liked. It was because it harkened back to the 16-bit era. It had like a lot of like references to Sonic 1 through 3 and Sonic CD. And the levels design is really good. The music is great. It's got that old school Sonic feel, and they actually used some of the like they were inspired by some of the levels that didn't make it into the original games. Like famously, there was a desert level that was supposed to be in Sonic 2 that didn't end up making the final cut. They made that in Sonic Mania. So they
Ah.
really it actually started out as a fan project. This was the cool thing about it, and this is why Sega was so smart with this, and Nintendo could really take a page out of this book. Sonic Mania started out as a fan game. And it was just a bunch of people that love Sonic the Hedgehog and they wanted to make an old school Sonic game. Well, Sega caught wind of it. And, obviously they're like, okay, this is our IP, so we can't like let this just go through. But instead of like just going in and cease and desist and canceling the project like Nintendo would, Sega's like, okay, you guys can't do this on your own, but come work for us. Come develop the game for us and make
Smart.
this game and release it, and we'll publish it, and it'll
Yeah.
be published by Sega. It'll be an official Sonic franchise game, and you guys can make it. And that's what they did, and it came out and it was amazing, and people love this game. I haven't played it yet myself. Like I said, I really do want to try it out eventually, because I've heard great things about it, and it really harkens back to that old school Sonic feel. Other more recent games that have come out, I've heard some good things about Sonic Forces, which is another 3D game. Sonic Forces kind of became like the dream game for all the Sonic fandom people because you could make your own character.
Oh God.
So you can make your own Hedgehog, so you can guarantee you get what we just experienced happened in Sonic Forces, um so that was kind of a thing. And I've heard Sonic Frontiers is actually pretty good, because it's like an open world game.
Hmm.
I've heard good things about it. I haven't played it myself, but I did hear really good things about it. And apparently there's a game, Sonic Superstars, coming out actually very soon, which is going to be another like side-scrolling 3D platformer,
Nice.
or side-scrolling, but like with 3D graphics. So it's like going to be like the OG Sonic games with like updated graphics. So that's looking like it'll be pretty good too. I think Sonic side-scrolling games have kind of like largely been pretty like stayed decent, like not the greatest, but they haven't been as bad as like Sonic 06. So I think the side-scrolling games kind of really kept the franchise going
Yeah,
over the last few years.
I think they're getting better. I mean, there's also Sonic Unleashed, which has like you turn into a werewolf,
Yeah, there was
which
a
is
lot
kind
of
of
like
weird.
weird spin-off games that happened like after Sonic 06, like Unleashed, and there was like Sonic and the Dark Knight or something like that. There was just like a lot of weird ones. Um there was also, like Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games, which was really cool because it kind of
Yes.
really brought the
Well,
two franchises together.
well,
The two
that helped. I would say that release helped Sonic kind of bounce back from his slump.
Yeah.
Because first of all, it was like, I mean, it was it was marketed as like, oh well, Nintendo and Sonic have finally buried the hatchet. So,
Yeah,
now Sonic's gonna be in a lot of games with Mario, and they're gonna compete. This was like kind of like a play on like the Beijing Olympics, and they released it in the same year, so you could do
yep,
all that stuff. But I mean, in reality, Nintendo just was too big to fail and had Sega over a barrel in a way.
yeah,
And they were like, okay, well, looks like that thing you tried to kill us with isn't really working out for you so much. So maybe you put him in a Mario game.
yeah,
And Sega was kind of like, I guess our friend with the blue hair can can show up at can. I guess he's in need of cleaning the pipes, and he might have to call a plumber.
yeah,
And that worked, but it helped Sonic more than ever.
yeah. Well, and then eventually, in the newer Smash Brothers games, they included Sonic finally, which Sonic had been a character that people had been calling for a long time. And so, when he finally was added to Smash Brothers, I think a lot of people were really happy about that because, it was, cool to finally see Sonic get some recognition, being like one of the most iconic video game characters of all time. Probably
Yeah.
second only to Mario,
I would
honestly.
think so. I
Because,
would
like,
think so. I can't think of another character that compares to the two
yeah,
besides Donkey Kong, which is synonymous with Mario as well as
exactly.
Luigi and like Mario and all of its characters, I would say is contained within Mario himself.
Right.
But I would say Sonic is definitely number two.
Yeah. Yeah.
Possibly
Yes.
Mega Man as a third. I don't know.
I don't even really know, it's hard to say because, you have, you know, there's like more modern ones like Master Chief and stuff that a lot of people know, of course, and like the Doom guy.
Right.
You could go
Kratos.
down the list of characters. Mega Man is definitely in that top 10 list, I would say. But really, I don't think anybody has quite gotten the attention as Mario and Sonic. Pokemon, kind of. Pokemon's probably up there with Mario and Sonic, like Pikachu specifically.
Yeah.
But like, you know, like Sonic has a blimp in the Macy's Day Parade, Thanksgiving
Yeah.
Day Parade, which is like that's like a huge achievement. If you're a franchise and your character has a blimp in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, you've made it
Well,
pretty
then I
much.
I think that would then I think then that would automatically slot Pokemon into number three because
Yeah,
Pikachu also has a Macy's float.
exactly.
Well,
That's
not a
why.
float, a balloon. I'm sorry, Sonic
Yeah.
has a balloon.
Yes.
But in general, those three are in the Macy's Day Parade, and Mario will definitely have a new balloon this year.
Yeah. Well, especially with like the Nintendo World, Universal Nintendo World opening up in Universal California.
That's right.
At the Super Mario Brothers movie, like it's there. He'll definitely. Mario's always going to be on top. Like I don't think there's
Yeah.
any video game character that will ever be more iconic than Mario.
At this point, it's impossible. Like
Yeah.
Mario and Sonic are basically the Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny of their respective of the video game world.
Yeah. Exactly. I was about to say like Mario is pretty much the Mickey Mouse, and yeah, Sonic would be probably the Bugs Bunny. Because they're both just as iconic, and
Yeah.
you really, I don't think you'll ever see another like franchise that has that kind of uh like brand power.
Yeah. Oh, the guy was playing Jack 2 while he was recovering from Sonic, and that's what inspired him to to get back in it and make another game.
Oh, okay, so there you go.
I think the game was I think the game may have been Sonic um Frontiers no, not Frontiers. I forget the game that he ended up making, but there was another Sonic game
Hmm.
that he wound up making after Heroes.
Okay.
But yeah, 2 of all games pulled him into it. Oh, maybe that was Shadow. I'm not sure. It might have been Shadow. Anyway, continue.
Yeah,
Because
so I would say that, largely Sonic's image has been healed a little bit since the dark times of the mid 2000s.
yeah, and also we have the Sonic movies as well, which
Of
the Sonic
course.
movies were great. I mean, initially the character design. This was another thing. This is another lesson in just listen to your audience. Because originally, and possibly at some point we can talk about the Sonic movies as well. There
Mhm.
might be several Sonic episodes, and then we can make
Yeah.
a Sonic omnibus for people. But originally the Sonic character design did not look like Sonic. In fact, it looked like this weird warped, like
It looked like a cursed image.
it looked like Sonic went on a bender and got addicted to lots of drugs and needs to go to rehab badly. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
And fans were like, "What the hell is this? We don't want it. Please don't do this. We're not gonna watch the movie if you put this out into the world." And the backlash was so strong that they said, "Well, what do you want?" And they were like, "Just make it look like Sonic."
Yeah.
And they listened, and it did. And the movie, it's a good movie.
Yeah.
Both of them are good. The second one, I think, is better because it has Idris Elba in it, and he's probably the best actor current, like, in the world right now.
Yeah, I thought it's hilarious that they got him to play Knuckles.
But he's perfect for
I know
Knuckles.
it's like crazy though that they actually got Idris Elba to play friggin' Knuckles. Like,
Yeah.
Knuckles the Echidna,
I
played
mean,
by Idris Elba. Like,
also, and who would have thought that Jim Carrey would have been such a great Dr.
oh yeah,
Robotnik? He was
yeah,
perfect.
yeah,
Like, I hadn't seen a Jim Carrey like this in years.
yeah,
Maybe since, like, Liar Liar. I can't remember the last time that I really enjoyed a Jim Carrey movie that I would want to go back to. I can't remember the last time, or I don't know, Eternal Sunshine or the Truman Show. I don't know. One of the earlier 2000 movies of Jim Carrey. Like,
yeah,
he hadn't been this good since this. And these two movies, if I don't know if he's done anything since
I don't think so. I think
Sonic
the only
2.
two movies he's semi-retired. He really doesn't want to do movies anymore.
Yeah, so if Sonic the Hedgehog is his swan song, then great way to go out on.
Yeah,
Like, I love him as Robotnik.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, the casting really couldn't get better with those
Yeah.
movies, which is it's hilarious because it's like, with Sonic the Hedgehog movie, they really could have phoned it in, and initially they did with the design, but they listened to the fans, and it came out great. Like, they just, it's too bad that Sega didn't listen to the fans initially back in the mid 2000s, but
Yeah, but they learned their lesson, it seems,
yeah,
when new management got in and that
yes,
understands what direction the company should continue to go in, because now Sega's fine. Or I think they're fine. I want to say that they're fine. But I think from a gaming perspective, they're doing okay,
yeah,
at least in the Sonic department. But she's just transcended pop culture,
yeah,
and all because somebody again listened to their audience and went with the blue hedgehog because the people on the street said, "I like it."
yes,
So I think Sonic is
yeah,
a testament of how of why it's important to understand your audience and your fan base and to give them what they want
yeah.
and
It's
to work with them too.
Sonic is in a lot of ways like the underdog kind of fan favorite, like uh uh mascot,
Yeah.
like, and I think that's kind of like what's kind of lent his made his longevity, like made him so, like, given him the longevity that he has, Sonic.
Yeah.
Is because he kind of has always been the underdog because how are you going to dethrone Mario and Nintendo really? But, they did it in a way that where they listened to their fans and kind of found their own little niche.
And for a
And
little while, they did dethrone Mario.
yeah, yeah. I think Nintendo was better at playing the long game, and that's how
Yeah,
that's how they survived in the end, you
I
know?
think so too.
But I mean, again, Sonic is not a failure. It's absolutely a success story because,
No, it definitely is.
he is the, second only to Mario.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, it's crazy. I
yeah.
mean, not to bring this on, not to bring this on a downer, but there in the last couple of days and weeks, there has been some news about one of the co-creators, and Yuji Naka, which he worked at Square Enix. He went on to do other things, and unfortunately, he got involved in insider trading while he was at Square Enix. And he, well, I'll just read this quick article from Polygon, even though I normally don't like their articles because they don't hide. Most of their writers are not very good. I'll be blunt with you, but a lot of video game journalism, there's not a lot of good writers in there. I
Yeah.
mean, even journalism in general, the quality is just it's it's not what it once was, and that's why the industry is dying. Spoken from a former journalist
Mm-hmm.
who moved on to bigger and better things. Um, Yuji Naka, co-creator of Sonic the Hedgehog, was given the author is Owen S. Good. Owen S. Good. I don't know if he is good. Um, that's for you to decide, and Owen's family and friends. Anyway, Yuji Naka, co-creator of Sonic the Hedgehog, was given a prison sentence of 2 years and 6 months, as well as fines totaling 1.2 million. The article is from July 7th, so a couple of days ago. According to for his role in an insider training scheme dating to 2020. It's okay when the politicians do it, though. According to he didn't. That's not in the article. According to Japanese news, this is. If only he wrote that. According to Japanese news agency GG Press, Naka's prison sentence has been suspended for 4 years, meaning he avoids serving time as long as he adheres to the conditions of his release and doesn't break the law again during this time. In suspending Naka's sentence, the judge noted that he had shown remorse for his crime. Whether he did or not is for you to decide. That's not in the article, Chris. Naka, 57, was twice arrested on insider trading charges. First in November, again in December, in unrelated matters. The sentencing on Friday concerned both cases. If you're 57 and you've already made all the money you're gonna make, and like you've already made a ton of money by being a co-creator of Sonic and whatever royalties that includes, I think it's fine to pack it in and just don't do anything stupid.
Mm-hmm.
That's not in the article. The first arrest involved a scheme to buy stock in developer Aiming in the early 2020, based on inside information that it would be developing Dragon Quest Tact, a mobile title. Square Enix's project and partnership with Aiming was not public at the time, and Naka was at Square Enix working on the ill-fated platformer Balan Wonderworld. In the second matter, Naka and another Square Enix employee, Taisuke Sasaki, were accused of buying shares in A-Team, which developed the mobile spin-off Final Fantasy VII, The First Soldier. The case alleges that Naka and Sasaki acted before the collaboration was made public. The two men were said to have made hundreds of millions of yen in the deal. 1 million US converts to more than 140 million yen. Naka co-created Sega's mascot Sonic the Hedgehog in collaboration with artist Naito Oshima in the early 1990s. Okay, that's in the article. Owen, you're not that good. He left Sega in 2006 to work independently before joining Square Enix in 2018, where he teamed back up with Oshima to develop Balan Wonderworld, or Balan Wonderworld, or Balan Wonderworld. I don't know. Maria Marie, that's what it is. She's from Staten Island. An April 2022 interview, that's not in the article. This is. In an April 2022 interview, Naka revealed he was removed from Balan Wonderworld's development 6 months before its 2021 launch and sued Square Enix, though he did not disclose how that case was resolved. Naka departed Square Enix about 2 months after Balan Wonderworld launched. And that's it.
There you go.
But, yeah, so... Play a stupid game, win a stupid prize. Good going, Naka.
Yeah.
Good going, Yuji Naka. Great idea. Oh, I didn't know I broke the law, so I broke it again. Okay. Glad that's out of the way. That's my opinion. It is not. I'm not a lawyer. That's just my opinion, man. He's in the public domain now. I can say things. It's there, but the other guy seems to be doing just fine. By the way.
Yeah.
But yeah, back to Sonic. Sonic is just, he's transcended all medias.
Yeah.
Outside of video games, the character has just been a tremendous success. You know, the Bugs Bunny to Mario's Mickey Mouse. We've already said that. Mm-hmm. Gets his own balloon in the Macy's Day Parade. I mean, I don't have one yet, but at some point, people are going to be disturbed come Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
But it's just crazy. Revolutionized gaming, took the world by the balls and ran it through every wall. He did everything fast, and in all other media, like he had a rough patch, but who doesn't? And in all other mediums, like all the cartoons, from what I understand, all the series are good. Series? Is series already plural? I don't know. But they've all been good from what I understand, and the movies, as we just said, have been great. So there's really nothing that this little blue hedgehog can't do with tennis shoes.
Mm-hmm.
Just monstrous.
Yeah.
And I love this guy.
Yeah. I have a lot of fond memories playing Sonic the Hedgehog games growing up.
Yeah. Playing games.
Watching the cartoon.
Yes, loving the cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
And just, all around, just a wholesome, happy family character. And just great guy. Well, great hedgehog. Yeah. Yep. That's what he is.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's all. I think I've said all that I've got to say. Anything else that you want to wrap this thing up with?
That's about it, I think.
All righty. Well, now you know, everybody. This has been Why Does This Exist? I've been Chris.
And I've been Rob.
And remember, question everything.
Good night, everybody.